The billionaire came home early and nearly fainted when he saw what the cleaner was doing. The mansion stood like a monument to silence. Stark glass, polished stone, and chrome reflected the last sliver of sunlight as it disappeared behind the Los Angeles hills. Inside, everything gleamed. Floors so clean they could show your soul, surfaces without fingerprints, walls without family photos. Perfection, but not peace. Michael Carter sat alone in his office, surrounded by walls of dark wood and tall windows that stretched up 2 stories. He didn't look up from his tablet as the digital clock blinked past 6:15 p.m. Another acquisition, another zero added to his net worth. Another hour lost to distraction. Behind that stoic gaze, grief slept lightly, always ready to rise. 2 years ago, Anna had died in a car accident. She was light, color, music, all things that no longer lived in this house. Since the night of her death, their daughter Emma hadn't spoken a single word, not a whisper, not a sound, as if her voice had been buried with her mother. Michael had tried everything, therapy, specialists, expensive treatments in glossy offices, but nothing reached Emma. Nothing broke the glass wall she'd placed between herself and the world. And so, Michael buried himself in work. Meetings replaced mornings with his daughter. Emails became his lullaby. His world was organized, efficient, silent, just like the house. The only real human connection left in that mansion was Martha, the head housekeeper. In her late 60s, with warm, dark eyes and a spine forged from decades of discipline, she had practically raised Michael after his own parents had died. She managed the estate with grace and sadness, always mourning what the house used to be when Anna was alive, and Emma laughed freely. Then Rachel arrived. She was young, barely mid-20s, recommended through an agency with excellent references. Michael barely registered her presence when Martha introduced her, waving a quick approval as he took a call. Rachel was just another body to keep the machine running. But Rachel wasn't like the others. She didn't just sweep floors or wipe down countertops. She talked to Emma, even if Emma didn't talk back. She sat beside her during meals, humming little songs, drawing silly faces on napkins, arranging fruit into shapes. Martha noticed it first, the faintest curve at the corner of Emma's lips. "She watches her," Martha said one evening, while Michael absent-mindedly stirred his coffee. "Really watches her, like Anna used to." Michael didn't respond. He didn't know how to. The following week, Michael's schedule shifted unexpectedly. A meeting cancelled last minute, and he found himself home by 3 p.m., an unusual occurrence. As he stepped out of his car, the first thing he noticed was the sound. Laughter. It was faint, like the memory of music, but it was there. Michael frowned. No one laughed in this house. He followed the sound around the side of the house to the backyard, and then he saw them. Rachel, drenched from head to toe in soapy water, stood barefoot on the grass, holding Emma on her shoulders. A pile of wet laundry and a small kiddie bucket sat nearby. Emma's tiny hands were tangled in Rachel's hair as she laughed, really laughed, open-mouthed, eyes sparkling, her voice like the first song after a long winter. Michael froze. His daughter, silent, broken Emma, was laughing, but his mind, trained by loss and guarded by suspicion, twisted the moment into something ugly. What the hell was the housemaid doing horsing around like this? With his child, covered in soap, playing like some clown. Where was the professionalism, the boundaries, the respect? "Rachel," he barked. The sound sliced through the afternoon. Rachel turned sharply, her smile falling. Emma looked down, startled, and immediately clutched tighter. "Get down," Michael ordered. "Now!" Rachel carefully lowered Emma to the grass, her hands trembling. Emma's laughter had died, her mouth shut like a trapdoor. Michael stormed forward. "What exactly do you think you're doing? This is not a playground. This is not daycare. You're here to work, not to behave like a child yourself." Rachel looked up at him, soaking wet, chest heaving from the moment. "She laughed," she said softly. "I don't care," Michael snapped. "You're fired. Get your things. Leave immediately." Emma tugged at his sleeve. Her lips moved, forming something, maybe a plea, but no sound came. Rachel blinked, stunned. Sir, please." "You're done," he interrupted coldly, already turning away. "Martha will handle your paperwork." Rachel stood in the same spot as he walked off. Emma tried to run after her, but Martha gently stopped her with a quiet, "Come, sweetheart." Emma didn't cry. She just stared, like someone watching a door close they didn't know had been open. Rachel packed her bag in silence. Martha helped, her face tight with disappointment. "He doesn't know," Rachel whispered on the verge of tears. "She spoke. She said, 'again,' when I lifted her up. And up." I heard her. Martha froze. Her hand clutched a folded dress tighter. "She spoke?" Rachel nodded. "Twice." Martha didn't respond. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, where Michael's footsteps echoed down marble floors like a gavel. Outside, Rachel paused by the gate. She looked back once toward the window where Emma stood watching her. She lifted her hand, barely, a silent goodbye. Then she disappeared into the twilight. That night, Michael poured himself a drink and stared out the tall window. The silence had returned, deep, thick, and absolute. He sat in the living room, drink untouched, the ice melting quietly, and for the first time in months, the house felt colder than ever. The house had gone quiet again, not the comfortable quiet of a peaceful home, but the cold, suffocating stillness that settles in after something precious is broken. Emma hadn't laughed since Rachel left. She hadn't smiled. She barely moved. The light in her eyes, the one that had flickered back to life for just a moment, had gone out again. Michael noticed the change, but he couldn't explain it. Every morning, she sat at the breakfast table in silence, picking at her food. Every evening, she curled up on the same couch, staring blankly at the television, unresponsive to anything playing on the screen. He watched her from a distance, as he always had, but now something felt wrong. Worse than before. It gnawed at him. Late at night, he'd walk past her room and pause at the door. He'd listen to the soft sound of her breathing. He'd remember Anna's voice singing lullabies in that same room years ago, and how laughter used to echo through the hallways. He'd remember what it felt like to come home and be greeted with tiny arms around his legs and a voice shouting, "Daddy!" Now silence. 3 days after Rachel was fired, Martha found him in the study. She didn't knock. Michael looked up from his laptop, brows raised. "Martha, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. There was a heat in her voice that he hadn't heard in years. Michael leaned back. "If it's about Emma, I know she's been—" She spoke. The words hit him like ice water. "What?" "She spoke," Martha repeated. "That day, when you came home early, while she was playing with Rachel." Michael blinked. "Are you sure?" "I was watching from the kitchen window. Rachel picked her up and Emma said, 'Up.' A few minutes later she said, 'Again.' Clear as day." He said nothing. "You fired the only person who got through to her," Martha continued, voice low and angry. "The first words she's spoken in almost 2 years, Michael, and you shut it down." He stared at her. His hands slowly dropped to his lap. "She was laughing," he murmured, more to himself than to her. I thought it was inappropriate. She was playing games during work." "No," Martha said flatly. "She was healing your daughter." The silence between them was thick. Then she turned and walked out. That night, Michael sat alone in his bedroom, lights off, curtains drawn. He couldn't get Rachel's face out of his mind. The moment she realized he didn't care that Emma had laughed, the way she stood there, soaked and stunned, as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Emma had spoken, and he hadn't even listened. He tried to rationalize it. He was protecting his daughter, trying to keep boundaries intact, trying to maintain order. But deep down, he knew the truth. He hadn't protected anyone. He had destroyed something beautiful. And now, Rachel was gone. The next morning, Michael called the agency that had sent Rachel. The woman on the other end of the line apologized and explained that due to privacy policy, they couldn't disclose any personal information. No address, no phone number, no forwarding contact. He searched online, no social media profiles, no LinkedIn, no mentions in staff directories. It was like she had vanished. And for the first time in years, Michael felt helpless. So he hired someone, a private investigator he'd used in corporate cases before. He gave the man everything he knew, her full name, approximate age, the agency she'd worked through. Within 48 hours, he had an address, an apartment on the outskirts of the city, near an old warehouse district. Not a safe area, not a place anyone should raise children. Michael didn't wait. He drove himself. The building was old and grey, its stairwell stained with years of rain and graffiti. He climbed to the 3rd floor and stood outside apartment 3C, hesitating. Then he knocked. Footsteps. The door opened a crack, chain still on. Rachel's eyes widened when she saw him. Then the door slammed shut. He knocked again. "Please, just let me talk." No answer. "I know what I did," he said, leaning toward the door. "I know I was wrong. I know she spoke. I didn't listen. I'm sorry." The silence stretched. Then the door opened slowly. Rachel stood in the hallway, arms crossed, face unreadable. She looked exhausted. Behind her, Michael could see a small, cluttered living room with mismatched furniture and 2 teenagers sitting at a fold-out table, books and cereal bowls in front of them. He took a cautious step forward. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to say it face to face." She nodded barely. "Say it then." "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said, for what I did, for not trusting you, and for not realizing what you meant to Emma until it was too late." Rachel's arms tightened over her chest. "You embarrassed me, fired me in front of your daughter, treated me like I was nothing." "I know," he said quietly. She stared at him for a long moment. Then finally she stepped aside. He entered slowly, taking in the space. It was small but clean, homey in a way his mansion had never been. The 2 teenagers glanced up, one boy, one girl, maybe 15 and 16. Rachel introduced them quickly. "Ethan and Lily, my siblings." Michael nodded. "Hi?" They nodded back, wary. Rachel gestured for him to sit. He did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "Emma is special. She's not broken. She's just waiting for someone to reach her. That moment in the yard, that was her opening up. And you slammed the door shut." Michael looked down. "I know. I can't go back to being just your maid," she said. "If I do this again, I need it to mean something." He looked at her. "Name it." "I want 3 things," she said firmly. "First, I want to be recognized not as a housemaid, but as Emma's educator. Full respect. Full authority." "Done." "Second, I want my college education fully covered. I was studying early childhood development before I had to drop out." "Also done." "And third, I want my siblings placed in proper schools, safe ones, good ones." Michael didn't hesitate. "Consider it handled." Rachel leaned back, arms still crossed. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Carter." "I know," he said. "This isn't charity. It's justice." Silence. Then finally she nodded. "I'll come back Monday." Rachel returned on a quiet Monday morning, carrying the same worn canvas bag she had taken with her the day she left. The iron gate slid open slowly, as if the house itself were unsure whether to welcome her back. She barely had time to take 2 steps inside before a small figure came running across the marble floor. Emma. The little girl collided with her legs and wrapped her arms around Rachel's waist with a strength that startled her. Rachel dropped her bag instantly and knelt, pulling Emma close, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and sunshine. Emma pressed her face into Rachel's shoulder. No words came, but her body spoke loudly enough. Rachel's throat tightened. "I missed you too," she whispered, though Emma hadn't said it aloud. From the hallway, Michael watched. He didn't step closer. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, witnessing a reunion he had almost stolen from his daughter forever. The sight stirred something unfamiliar in his chest, something between relief and regret. Rachel looked up and met his gaze briefly. There was no smile, no accusation, just acknowledgement. Then she turned her attention fully back to Emma. That was the first lesson Michael learned. Rachel didn't perform affection. She lived it. The changes didn't come all at once. They came quietly, like light creeping through closed curtains. Rachel established routines, simple ones. Breakfast at the table, not in front of screens. Afternoon playtime, story hour before bed. She didn't push Emma to speak. She didn't ask questions that demanded answers. Instead, she narrated the world gently. "We're putting on your shoes now," she'd say softly. "One shoe, 2 shoes, ready to go outside." Emma listened. They spent more time outdoors. Rachel asked Martha for permission to use a corner of the backyard that had been abandoned, dry soil, overgrown weeds, forgotten like so many things in the house. "We're going to make a garden," Rachel told Emma, handing her a small shovel. Emma hesitated. Then she dug. They planted roses, red ones, pink ones, white ones. Rachel explained how roots needed patience, how growth couldn't be rushed. Emma knelt beside her, dirt under her fingernails, focused in a way Michael had never seen before. One afternoon, Michael passed by the open patio doors and heard a sound that made him stop cold. Water. The word was barely louder than a breath. Rachel froze, eyes wide, then smiled slowly. "Yes," she said gently. "Water helps them grow." Michael pressed his hand against the doorframe. Emma had spoken again, not because someone demanded it, but because she wanted to. Michael began coming home earlier. At first he told himself it was coincidence. Then he stopped lying. He watched from a distance, Rachel sitting cross-legged on the grass with Emma, their heads bent together. Rachel guiding Emma's hands as they trimmed dead leaves. Rachel clapping softly when Emma said a new word. Rose. More. Daddy. Oh, that one nearly brought him to his knees. He started joining them in the evenings, awkward at first, silent, unsure where to put his hands, his words. Rachel didn't push him away. She didn't invite him in either. She simply made space. Slowly, he filled it. The thunderstorm came without warning. The sky cracked open in the middle of the night, rain pounding the windows, thunder shaking the walls. Michael woke to a sound he hadn't heard in years. Crying. He was out of bed before he realized it, moving down the hallway toward Emma's room. He paused at the door, heart racing, unsure if he was welcome. Another sob. He went in. Emma was curled up in bed, shaking. When she saw him, her eyes widened. For a moment, he feared she'd pull away. Instead, she reached for him. Michael sat on the edge of the bed and gathered her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, clinging tightly. "It's okay," he whispered, voice rough. "I'm here. I've got you." The thunder boomed again. Emma flinched. "Storm," she said, the word trembling but clear. "Yes," he said, holding her closer. "Just a storm." He stayed until her breathing evened out, until her fingers loosened their grip. He stayed longer than that. From the doorway, Rachel watched silently, her chest aching with something warm and painful all at once. Later that night, the storm fading into a distant rumble, Michael found Rachel in the kitchen, making tea. "I didn't know what to do," he admitted quietly. "I just went to her." You did exactly what she needed, Rachel said. They sat at the table, steam curling between them. I used to think money could fix anything, Michael said. Doctors, specialists, programs, but you didn't use any of that. Rachel shrugged slightly. Children don't need fixing. They need safety, presence. And what do you need? He asked before he could stop himself. She met his eyes. Boundaries. He nodded. I remember. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy. My wife loved gardens, he said suddenly. She said watching things grow reminded her that pain wasn't permanent. Rachel smiled softly. She sounds like someone I would have liked. Michael swallowed. I think you would have. Their eyes lingered a moment too long. Rachel looked away first. The next morning, Emma sat at breakfast, swinging her legs under the chair. She looked from Michael to Rachel, then back again. My second mom, she said, pointing at Rachel. The spoon slipped from Michael's hand and clattered against the plate. Rachel's breath caught. Emma! Emma nodded firmly, as if she'd made a very serious decision. Michael didn't correct her. He just smiled.